Could you imagine if you were told you only had a certain number of years left to live? But they're going to be good years. Good years when you're healthy, but you know it's only going to last a certain time. If you knew that, looking at your life now, what would you suddenly start to do differently? Where would your priorities change? And what is it that you start to do? I've been reading this book recently called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it reflects on a story from a palliative care nurse in Australia, Bronnie Ware, who discusses the lessons that her patients learnt as they went through life. And it gives rise to a very interesting question. If you knew that you had a certain amount of time left, of good time left in your life, what would you do differently? If you knew you had maybe 4 or 5 years of really quality time, but then it was going to end suddenly, what would you start to do differently now? And I discuss this with a lot of my clients to figure out what's really important to them, what perhaps would be undone if they didn't live as long as they hope they may. Because this is important to link it in with their financial plans. And here were some of their answers. I would prioritise my family and friends, but I wouldn't stop working. I would travel to all the places that I've always dreamed of travelling to. And these were rich and varied. I'd make sure that my family are properly catered for. I would work hard to stay fit so that I could enjoy those last few years to the maximum. And this answer came from a doctor. I would make sure my medical preferences were well known so that I could have a dignified death. And a lot of those answers were about doing stuff that we want to do, but also that we feel we ought to do. And so from this, people were able to put in place the trips that they always wanted to do. They were able to understand the things that were really a priority, but they kept putting off. It was to move everything in the distance a lot closer, to give them some insight, some instruction, some guidance, and to fulfill those things that they always wanted to do. So they didn't face the dilemma of the people in the book, which was that time had passed them by and they no longer had the opportunity. If you knew you had a certain amount of time left in your life, what would you now start to do differently? What are those really important things that you value deeply, you feel you want to do, and you feel you ought to do? And if you were to put them into place, how different would your life be?